Hello and welcome to the Trust and Influence in B2B podcast. I'm your host, Joel Harrison. This podcast, as the name suggests, explores all aspects of the role of trust and influence in B2B marketing and how that's evolving and challenging brands and marketers on an everyday basis. And episodes are released weekly, generally speaking. Today, we're going to talk about NPS, which is the Net Promoter Score. If you're not familiar with that, and I think most marketers probably are because it's been around a long time, NPS has survived more obituaries than almost any other metric in B2B marketing. B2B teams have quietly resented it for years, many of them at least. A single loyalty score standing for something is complicated, whether a company actually gets considered when a deal starts, but nobody's produced anything credible enough to replace it until possibly now. So Bain Co at Cannes recently released some new research which argues that the real predictor to B2B growth isn't loyalty. It's whether a vendor makes a buyer's brackets in inverted commas day one list, the mental shortlist formed before anyone picks up the phone. My guest today has read that research and asked a different question. Could you estimate your position on that shortlist without ever actually surveying a buyer? And he built an AI prompt that does exactly that, scoring companies against Bain's own framework using nothing but public signals. He's been sharing that 2x2 shortlist matrix with his own network and the wider world as well. So he's giving something back to the world of B2B marketing. But I guess today is Tony Larks, who's a seasoned B2B marketing leader with over 20 years experience across the tech sector. And this is a conversation which sits at the edge of promotion and proof. Tony's built something genuinely useful, and I want to understand exactly how it works, what it can and can't do, and whether it holds up to the real thing. Frankly, I've been looking for an excuse to talk about NPS for quite a long time. Tony's brilliantly come along and given me the excuse to do it.
I can't believe we're leading with NPS. Nobody's going to watch this episode now.
Well, I don't know.
Please don't switch off. Don't switch off.
Don't switch off. Don't switch. The good stuff coming too. I think you've got to set up what you're going to knock down. So before we get into it with Tony, so what are we going to learn from this episode? Well, we're going to talk about what's actually wrong with NPS, the B2B trust metric, and why nobody's replaced it until now. What the day one list is and why Bain says most lost deals are never winnable to begin with. How Tony built an AI model that estimates buyer confidence from public signals alone and where approach is strongest and weakest. And what brands should actually do once they know where they sit on the shortlist. So remember, if you've liked this episode, don't forget to subscribe, to like, to follow, to give us a rating. Any or all of the above is really helpful for me in terms of continuing to build this podcast and finding fascinating guests like Tony, no pressure, Tony, to talk about interesting topics. Awesome. That's it for now. Tony, welcome to the show. Great to have you on.
Thank you, Joel. I'd love the description of seasoned versus veteran. So I'm going to start using it myself.
Seasoned, yeah, it's a euphemism, isn't it? But I think it's a strong one. We were discussing before, and Tony and I have kind of known each other for a long time. Probably met once a long time ago, judging for the B2B Marketing Awards, which is always a great meeting experience. And so it's a great opportunity to reconvene and talk about something like this. And if you can't see Tony, if you're not watching this video, he's got the world's best microphone. It's like something out of Star Wars. It's the kind of Death Star red thing that's poking out the corner of his screen. It's brilliant.
I am selling on my Amazon store, by the way, or TikTok shop. I've got them on my TikTok shop.
There we go. Okay. Right. Well, I can, like any good entrepreneur, like side hustles coming out there. And Tony, you were telling me as well that just a little bit more background about you. So you've done both sides of the B2B marketing kind of revenue spectrum. You've been a salesperson. You started your career in sales, and also enterprise and startups as well.
Yeah, started way back when in sales, and like any good salesperson, if you can't sell or can't close or hate talking to people on the phone, marketing was a great detract from that, like in terms of being able to scale sales, but without actually having to pick up the phone and make $100 a day. It was more SDR than sales. So yeah, and I've sort of really enjoyed my career. I've spanned everything from distribution to systems integrators to spending the last bunch of years in technology businesses, and the last 3 of those were startups, so 0 to 1 builds.
Fantastic. So lots of wealth of experience to bring to this, and then you clearly what we're going to talk about today is the fact that you're kind of leveraging or inhabiting this new AI kind of crowd developing world where we're sharing infrastructure and knowledge and sources, which is fantastic. So let's crack on then. So, but this conversation has roots, there's roots very close to home, and they say that great content should beget great content. And what I love about this is that you actually this was inspired by the podcast episode I did with Lottie O'Donoghue from Velo, and also the episode about Cannes, which had Bain's renouncement in it. So this was credit to your thinking. So what was it in those pieces that really got you thinking about building something?
Yeah, so look, Yeah, and I think this is a great time to be in B2B marketing because AI just makes everything possible. I know it also is sort of quite worrying for people not knowing like what's going to happen to my role and can my role be replaced by AI. I think if you embrace the technology, you'll just find that you become a lot smarter and a lot better at what you do. Specifically on the episode, like Lottie and yourself spoke a lot about that sort of recommendation engine and how advocacy and recommendation is a great way to sort of understand your relationship to a deal or understand the relationship to marketing. And a lot of that I've been building over the last year, looking at sentiment. A lot of what you do in marketing is actually to try and understand, well, what does the market think about the issue that you're trying to solve for? And what do they think about you or think about your competition? And you used to do a lot of this with sort of research, or you do a lot of it by desk research or like web surfing and building out big PowerPoint decks that took weeks, if not months, if not years. They were like a labor of love to get all that data together. So yeah, so a lot of the sentiment trackers I've been building is sort of really to try and assess a company and assess their market. So when you are going to try and help them, you sort of understand, well, who are they? What's the market they want to try and serve? And actually, what does the market think of that kind of solution today? And what's the competitor set? So I've been building a load of agents to sort of do that sort of work. But your conversation with Lottie and then the Bain report really synthesized that into, well, what if you could actually say there's a market I want to go and address? Well, who are the vendors actually addressing that market today? And where would they be most likely to stack rank in terms of a shortlist? And would I be considered in that as well? And it's interesting as you run this as sort of assessment. I've run it now for nearly 100 companies. Even startups it's useful for because startups have none of these signals, but they can look ahead and see, well, where's the competition addressing and where do they need to go in terms of being better day by day to sort of try and progress to get into that sort of consideration phase?
Yeah, it's fascinating because I think there's a really interesting conversation and a tangent around sentiment and reputation as well, which I think we're going to get into today. But I think these are interesting words, and which we're having we're creating new lenses to explore these things. So, and it's worth also saying before we go any further that you made the point clear. What you've created is free for anybody to use, right? You're not charging anybody. There's no money associated with it, which is why I feel very comfortable talking to you about it because you created something for the public good, which is available to everybody on the back of this.
Well, anybody needs, I'll actually put it on my website. They can just scrape it for free. But like the people I'm working with, there's about 30 B2B marketers that are all using it. It's the feedback so that you're making this thing bigger and better and addressing different segments. And I know we're B2B, but there's another part of marketing, like B2C. And they've got this whole product-led growth, which is also interesting for B2B. And I've been working with a few marketing people to adapt the same concept and apply it to a consumer lens. Which did make me feel a little bit shabby and dirty, but actually I learned a lot of things from that as well. Because at the end of the day, it's still a human, whether it's a consumer spending £50 or £50 a month now, because everybody wants subscription revenue, or enterprise spending $1 million, they still go through the same consideration phase.
So yeah, it's fascinating to understand that, and it's ultimately humans at the end of all of this, all the way through. Whilst AI is powerful, we need to keep that in mind. So, we started joshing a bit about NPS, but let's dig into that a bit more because that's where this has come from, right? NPS has been around for 25 years. I remember the guys at the company that created it, selling it to me and PR, way back when, before you even launched B2B marketing. And it's something that at b2bmarketing.net, and for the awards, the events that we run, that are run by that company, it's a very important metric for them. So it's kind of got this, it's been around for ages. It doesn't look like going anywhere. People talked about creating something new, but nothing's actually happened about that. Tell us what you think is wrong with NPS, not in theory, but actually what the issues you find are in practice with it.
So not to be contentious, but I actually don't think there's anything wrong with NPS. It's probably the things that are wrong are the way that people implement it or think they can gamify it rather than actually looking at its root cause. It's really interesting. It's like the simplest question with the simplest answer, but it's not the numerical number. It's actually how you relate it to the data behind it. And then it's how you interpret what people say, the reason why they gave that score. So the score is just a score. It's actually the value actually is in the free text that comes afterwards. And then your ability to take an action on that. we used it as well with the last few years for events, and we'd always celebrate, oh, we got an NPS of 70, and oh, that's brilliant. But actually, if you've asked 100 people to fill in a survey and only 20 do you more concerned about the 80 that didn't? So it's sort of like how you interpret the data, and then you think, well, if the 80 didn't, they don't feel they weren't either an advocate, like they weren't a promoter or a detractor. They weren't even passive. They just didn't care enough to fill in a form. They only had two questions, like give me a number and give me a reason why. So it's like how you implement it. And like, in the way I've used it in the past, if you segment it to your data and different kinds of customers and behaviors, you can really try and take action to the root cause. But I think what's happened over time, especially in B2B, we've used it as a vanity metric to show how good we are versus where the capability gaps and weaknesses are and what you need to do maybe to do something that's better next. And I always look at the NPS is great, but it's actually the sort of below the line, the people that didn't participate. You're thinking, well, what could I have done better? How can I engage them? How like, especially in an event context, where's the memory that I'm trying to drive from this? Will they remember me like on the tube home or next week or next month? Well, they didn't remember enough or care enough, not even to complete a simple click and respond. So yeah, I don't think it's broken per se, but the second part of that then is it's a passive metric. You're looking at your customers and how they're rating you, whereas what we're going to go on to talk about is more about a leading indicator of, are you going to be considered? The passive metric is, how would you rate me out of 10? You're either a promoter, great, I've got an advocate, how do I celebrate that and put you on a pedestal and use that advocacy and get you to tell other people? Detractor, great, you've told me because you want me to do something about it and fix something, hopefully. But I think the what Bain are working on now is this whole element of where's the consideration ahead of a decision to actually invest.
Which is plugged into a wider conversation around the role of brand and things like that. But just so we'll get into that just 1 second. But I think, what it sounds like you're saying is that and there's not necessarily anything wrong with NPS, but it's the kind of least worst, right? It's not, there's nothing better. It does a job. But the question is, could we do better? I think one thing you didn't kind of unpack in that, which I always struggle with a bit, is that there's a cultural aspect of NPS, which is that, am I right? I haven't prepped for this. My memory of NPS is that there's a level you have to get to where you're a detractor or a passive. And culturally, that's quite different in different countries, right? In the US, people tend to be much more enthusiastic about things and give people a 9 or a 10 quite comfortably. Whereas in the UK, we're all quite miserable, and we tend to go 7's okay, so I'll give you a 7 because you didn't knock my socks off. But if you get a 7, you're not a
promoter.
Exactly.
So it's 0 to 6 is a detractor, 7 and 8 is passive. Now I'd think 8, bloody good score, but not in a system. But actually, as you run NPS over time, you take your promoters less your detractors, and that gives you your score. So your scoring is -100 to +100. So I'll give you an example. When I worked in B2B financial services for a period of time, we had a group of our customers who we would penalize for not being PCI compliant. No PCI compliance. I thought they would be really, really upset, but they weren't. They'd be paying their £20 a month fine. It was SMB, and they were happy as Larry. We were scoring NPSs of sort of 20, 30. But the people that have gone through the 4-day assessment and the whole process of becoming compliant and putting in all the sort of the processes, we had an NPS of like -50. So it was almost like it's counterintuitive in the sense that, like, it got us thinking, how can you actually create a better experience of creating compliance to an industry regulation versus fining people for not being compliant? Does that make sense? Like, it was the simplicity of just paying £20 a month was like, oh, I paid £20 a month, I don't need to worry about that. And that created a much better score than those that were actually compliant. It just didn't make sense, but it did make sense because our compliance training was so tough. The systems were so tough. The changes they had to make were so tough. It was cheaper just to pay the fine. And that's what I mean about implementation of NPS in different segments and they're looking at different outcomes and cutting the data down, not just looking at the whole. So what you're saying is that that is a quirk. It's not necessarily a terminal quirk. So let's move on to talk then about what you think that Bain is likelihood to buy. Why is that different? And clearly you thought there was something good in that, and we'll move on to let's talk about just what Bain did initially, and we can talk about why yours is different in a minute. Tell us about that. So obviously, it's actually quite a nice paper from Bain because it's actually quite thin. There's only 9 pages, so it's actually quite easy to read and digest. And I'm sure you can socialize the work. And I think the sort of the thesis, they're right. It's and actually, having worked a lot of my career in enterprise sales and marketing organizations, you end up with this sort of pipeline of opportunities where you might describe them as the salesperson having happy years. I met Joel once. He's a really nice guy, and he told me he's going to buy from me. And we bank all our pipeline and chickens on Joel. And then at some point in the process, Joel disappears. And Bain called that a lost deal. I never called it a lost deal. We failed. We failed in the process because we just trusted one buyer in one big enterprise account that we would come through with that. And we all know that it takes 7, 10, in my case, my last company, it was 17 active buyers made the deal. So if you only got one, you've already got a gap. But yeah, there was this principle that within an enterprise sale, the deal that you've lost was never winnable. And it was never winnable because you've never considered in the first place. And Bain have sort of, I think working with LinkedIn, have assessed there's some key criteria that makes you winnable. And I don't know if we're going to go into detail on this, but their framework has 5 key areas that you can explore that sort of has this concept of like a day one inclusion list. Now, that's not to say you might join a process later on and be able to disrupt other people in the loop. But if you weren't one of the 5 they were originally considering, you're an outlier and your chances of winning are probably a lot lower. And actually, if you did have, as we know as B2B marketers, if you did have like a really good defined ideal customer profile and personas and target account list, you might already have qualified yourself out thinking this isn't in my sweet spot. But, sales marketing people, we like to chase revenue and we're sort of happy ears and we like jumping around. But I think the Bain work really sort of says like focus where you can win and focus where you've got a better propensity to sort of drive a positive outcome.
So that's all really good news, and that plays to the importance of account-based marketing or buyer group marketing, as Bain, as LinkedIn prefer to describe it, because they like to be able to own a term.
Yeah.
But it's predicated. The key thing that what you picked up on, as I understand it, is that what it requires essentially is a research study to understand the propensity of someone or understand the situation.
Yeah.
Whereas which is going to be theoretically obstructive or disqualifying for lots of organizations because they haven't got the cash to do that, or they haven't got the time to do it potentially either. Yeah. As well. Is that fair?
No, it's fair. And look, everything we're going to discuss later doesn't replace first-party research. If you've got the budgets and you've got the support of your leadership team, I would do the first-party research with Bain or other providers all day long, because the knowledge you'll get and the outcomes you'll get will be so powerful that you'll be 10x anyone else. But we live in the real world. Actually, a lot of this stuff you can do using the data you've got. As long as you're capturing when you lose or fail in a deal, you're capturing the reasons why, and you've got connected tissue, like you're saving everything into a CRM like Salesforce, you can actually interrogate Salesforce and actually understand, well, what are the reasons why I'm losing? Where am I losing? Am I losing at point of proof of concept, or am I even losing earlier than that? And if you can understand the reasons why and who the buyer was at the time, you can draw some conclusions from that. That's knowledge you've already got. You don't need to do research on that. But yeah, look, the first party research being proposed by Bain is one way. What I've tried to work on is, again, going back to the work I've been doing for the last year on sentiment, is then taking that sentiment further forward and looking at like what the analysts think of the market and the players in it. What do customers think through these sort of peer review sites that you have to be on a peer-reviewed site now anyway, because they're one of the main populators of an AEL/GEO program. What do your users think, the practitioners, because they're in formats like Reddit and X, and they're normally your detractors as well, but a lot of conversations are happening in Reddit now. It's very much an underrated B2B platform. And then also your employees. Actually, I tell you what's really interesting. When you run a sentiment analysis across those 4 sectors, your employees are more critical than anyone else. Especially your past employees, normally harboring a grudge, love to turn to Glassdoor or Blind or RepView and give the honest impression of what it was like to work at a company, maybe slightly tainted honest impression, but an impression nonetheless. And but even if you take current employees, you'll find that they're even quite open about being vocal what's broken or what's not. You can tune into that as well. So it's just trying to find where are the signals, where can you tune in, and then what do you trust or not. So
I think your point is really objective around, if you've got the resources, do the research, right? That's a really great way of looking at it. I mean, my experience talking to marketers is there's any one thing that gets cut, and in a time of cuts, it's going to be something like research. So, have you got, and people need to be agile. So, have you got the time to do this? So, I think what I'm hearing is this sounds like a more pragmatic way of getting some of the way towards the answer. Maybe not the most pure, detailed answer that you might get, but it'll get a long way towards it. And it plays into that question around how much of the truth is good enough. There's that book about sales, Jolt, which is saying about the Colin Powell methodology. You're only going to get 40% of the information that you probably need to make a decision. So, and that's what you've got to accept. So, I can see why a more pragmatic approach is compelling.
The other thing the Bain paper talks about, though, is also the hidden buyer within these accounts. And, as you work through these deals, you sort of map out what does the buying group look like for the technology you're selling into, the sector you're selling into, and who ideally do you need to have in the room. I remember, because I've been doing this for a while, we used to use a sales and marketing methodology called Miller-Hyman. There's this concept of blue sheets and brown sheets, but you would map out the whole buying group. But you try and assess what's their professional requirement, but what's the personal outcome they want as well? How are you going to help them in their career? And then how do you sort of move that along? But it was always trying to identify who are the hidden stakeholders. So it wouldn't just be the decision maker and the influencers. You'd be looking at the procurement and contracts, the user community, and then there was another group as well, which completely skipped my mind. But yeah, it was I think it was PDG. For life, we can't remember what G stands for now, but it's this sort of hidden, if you can map all of that out and then work out who are your hidden stakeholders, that's pretty cool. And, it's maybe not always marketing's role to be influencing the CFO or procurement en masse, but it's just being an audience to be aware of, because they are considering they're a consideration in that process. And now as we move on, you've also got this agentic layer as well. So you've got all these humans and then all these agents they're now using to go and do their own research. How do you show up there as well? So
just to forgive me, just for clarity. So it sounds like what you're proposing inherently picks up on these kind of signals, because that's what it's designed to do. It's designed to cast a broad net to a different set of criteria. Whereas Bain's approach is research orientated towards. Forgive my ignorance at this level. Does Bain's proposal pick up on these hidden buyers, or is that area where it struggles?
No. They very much talk about the hidden buyers and those other voices that would have authority in a process. Especially as markets change, procurement, they've got a specific role, and it's not just about driving down price. It's about ensuring that you can deliver on what you're going to deliver. And they do a lot of assessments about capability and reputation and brand. So as you're going into a discussion where you got your favorite vendor, you might find that procurement and contracts and legal might have a different vendor set that they want you to consider. I've certainly, my last roles as a senior marketing leader, procurement was part of our team. We made them part of our team so that we could actually work with the people we wanted to work with and understand where we needed to engage them early to get their input to make sure that we were all aligned so that we didn't get sort of diverted late on.
Okay. All right. That's really helpful to understand. So let's talk a bit more in more detail about what you've actually built then, and this kind of building an AI proxy for buyer trust. So, you built an AI prompt which estimates a company's day one list position using only public signals. I guess you figured out you could do this because you've been, as you said, you've been exploring AI, in recent months. So, was there when you saw this stuff from what Bain had done, did you immediately think, I can do this, or did it take a bit of a moment for the penny to drop?
It's sort of, I used a Boston matrix, so it's probably wrong. It's just a 2x2 matrix. It's like having done the sentiment for one company, basically what I did was say, from that one company, instead of building sentiment for them, go and find me their nearest 10 competitors. And then from them and their nearest 10 competitors, go and actually do the same assessment for all 11 of them. And do the assessment across all these sentiment checkers, across not just one analyst, not just Gartner, but Gartner, Forrester, Omdia, IDC, Co, or any other analyst that you think is appropriate to the sector in which they're addressing, because I don't always know the answer, but nice thing is AI does. Go and look at customer sentiment. Don't just look at Gartner Peer Insights. Look at G2, Crowd, Capterra, and any others you think are appropriate. For the employee, the user, go and look at Reddit, X, LinkedIn, and any other place such as community groups or their own, every vendor has their own support network. Go and log on and go and explore those as well. And then, where it's relevant, look at the employee. But I think the employee sentiment is always more harsh and critical than the others. And then, Bain, as I said, Bain really identified their day one inclusion list to include 5 areas. And I'd have to read them out because my memory's not the best, but meeting current and future needs, value related to total cost, a safe choice for the organization that can be defended internally. We'd remember that, Joel, as you'd never get fired for buying IBM.
Absolutely.
That's what I called it. But anyway, confidence in implementation and ease of working with the vendor. Well, they're all things you can assess as well. And so basically what I try to do is find what are the proxies for all of those 5 things related to also all the other sentiment checking that you're doing. So you're just harvesting this huge amount of information and then bringing it back and then distilling it down into a very, very simple 2x2 matrix where you then understand where do you plot related to your competition.
And that's very useful as well as wanting to understand your own potential, sometimes other people's potential too.
Yeah.
So it creates a whole other dimension to it as well. I guess what you're talking about there, what they're suggesting with those 5 criteria is essentially a way of a shortcut for an estimation of trust, isn't it? It's essentially.
Yeah, pretty much.
Do you think there are gaps there between this kind of this estimation and a more scientific measurement, or do you think that's as good as it needs to be?
Well, you said 40%. I don't really know yet. So is it 50, 60, or is it, have I met the threshold of Pareto's law, which 80% is good enough? I don't know. As I said, nothing would ever replace first party research with Bain or anybody else. Like, to do that first party research wouldn't replace it. From what I've seen of the model so far, it sort of stands scrutiny. And actually, I'm a big Claude advocate, so I use Claude. But actually, I've tested the model against a dozen other agentic platforms. So Grok and Gemini and Perplexity and ChatGPT and others, even the Chinese ones, and actually had them go and mark Claude's homework to get Claude to be better in terms of what it was doing. And it early on, it found some things, but now more recently, it seems to be quite solid. No, it's very hard to pick holes in the outcome. Now, if I expose any of this to other vendors that are related on the chart, they'd probably sort of not be best pleased. But the data's a data. It's not something I've made up. I'm not an analyst that spent huge amounts of time looking at all these companies and deciding where to plot. The AI and the algorithm and the outputs from all of this sort of data it's brought in has been able to assess that.
I think it's such an interesting case study. It's an open source example of open source example. Sorry, I did speech marks there if you weren't watching it.
Yeah.
Of how marketers are helping each other by exploring AI and then setting these findings and tools free. So I think it's fantastic. But one of the things that popped up though is that some of the signals you talked about, things like analyst reviews, analyst mentions, review volume, share of voice, could potentially be moved by PR and content spend. Is there a challenge here around reward visibility rather than genuine confidence? They're not quite the same things, are they?
Yeah, no, they're not. And actually, the best way to fix the signals that probably have the most influence is do a better job supporting your customers. Listen to what your customers are saying and go and fix the product roadmap. When a customer raises a technical issue, don't wait a day to get back to it. It's all the basics that you know, where you take somebody who's got a problem and you provide them the very best solution. They think that because everybody buying software knows there's vulnerabilities, they know there's always going to be technical issues, but they want you to step up and own it. And that's what you start to see through all the voices that you hear, like all of the sentiment and all the sort of the secondary sort of voices, is people that were dissatisfied because nobody looked after them when they needed your help. So yeah, you can go and freak the system around PR or like post more things on social or engage with like people that are commenting. Do that all day long, but actually the underlying principle is just do a better job servicing your customers and actually have a roadmap, be open and transparent about pricing, because a lot of things you see around this sort of, again, Bain's work as well talks around, value to relative total cost. Well, in enterprise sales there is a price, but there's also discounting ratios. Well, what have I paid related to somebody else who's maybe in a different sector or in a different country, and sometimes some of those things create dissatisfaction. Again, if you look at the prompt is totally open, so it's not like it's a black box. You can look at the prompt and think, well, I don't know why they picked Safe Choice to be looking at security certifications of ISO 27001 and SOC 2. They're not relevant to this. You can just change it. So that's what I mean. The prompt is just a prompt, and the prompt, we're going to help, we're working together to sort of improve the prompt. But if you think there's something that's sort of skewing it, change the prompt. But ultimately, I think it gives you a roadmap of where are we today? Where are we related to our competition based upon a similar measurement? Where do we need to be in the future? And, I think you mentioned PR. Like, these peer review sites are so core, so fundamental to B2B marketing in the future. That's why G2 have just acquired, like in the last year, Gartner Peer Insights. They are the engine for powering AEO and GEO. Like, it's the new SEO. So you've got to shop on these sites. So you've got to build advocacy with your customers. Goes back to NPS. Find your 9s and 10s and say, do me a favor. Let's translate that 9 and 10 and go and do me a review on Gartner Peer Insights. That's possibly where you can freak the system. But there's many people that are providing a 9 and 10 and they're giving you a 5 review on G2 Crowd. There's also a similar group that's going up and saying, I actually don't believe that because I didn't have that experience, and they're giving you a 3 review. So that's what I mean. Go and fix the fundamentals.
Well, this is an interesting companion case episode to an episode at the beginning of the year with a gentleman, Daniel, I forget his second name, who set up a company to identifying the number of fake reviews that are out there and how endemic that particular problem is. I'll surface that episode in this in the notes for this episode as well. So that's awesome. Fascinating. I didn't realize how endemic that problem was. So just one of the NPS's flaw, we're going to be being cynical. NPS's flaw was measuring loyalty rather than the decision that actually mattered. Could Shortlist share end up with a similar problem, a number that's easier to move than the thing it's actually supposed to represent?
So I'm not sure it's easy to move. So I am trying to do at the moment with the companies that I've assessed myself is to try and build a monthly check-in to see how has the shortlist changed in a month. And it doesn't change that dramatically. Now, maybe because I'm not publishing them, so people aren't aware of it and where they stand. But again, I think it comes down to the key fundamentals. Yeah, look, if you're going to go and close all the gaps, like get yourself SOC 2 or become compliant with NIST 2, like fix the compliance issues or publish a roadmap so it's open and actually deliver on what you're committing. That's a great thing for the end customer, I think, at the end of the day. And actually, if that means that you're more likely to be considered in a shortlist, then that's great. Why would that be an issue? The key thing at the moment is that, like, Bain's work is very new, and my shortlist matrix is a sort of a bedroom hack that's been shared with like 30 other marketing people. It's not publicly known. It's not being used by procurement people. But I do think procurement people are using agents to do assessments, maybe not too dissimilar to what Shortlist Matrix is. So to understand how you may show up to your buyer based on what they're using agents for themselves might just be a useful little way of getting ahead of the game.
It can't hurt, can it? Put it that way. So, okay, drawing to a close now. A couple of questions left. So say a company someone in marketers looking at this and they see exactly where they sit on your 2x2 grid. What's the first thing they should actually do about it? And does that change how budgets get allocated?
So I'm not sure it changes how budgets are allocated. The nice thing actually with the output of the prompt, it actually gives you a scoring table across all the different metrics. So you can see it's totally transparent. It gives you a synthesis. So it gives you an appraisal and also gives you all the data. So you can see all the inputs. So there's nothing hidden. So I don't think it changes budgets. I think it just enables you to identify what are the 1, 2, 3 or 4 things we can do, today, this week, this month, that might resolve some of the issues that our customers or prospects are feeling. It could be about awareness. Not every company is known. And that's what I said. Like, I've run this for a few startup companies, complete like pre-revenue, pre-customer. They're bottom of the bottom left. But that once they start turning on channels like social, they'll start to come up. They know they can start to build a principle from scratch, which is as you win a customer and you onboard them and you deliver a good service, get them to go and do a review. Get them to go and advocate for you if they're a promoter, hence back to NPS. So it's creating like a simple plan of things you can do that would make you better considered, maybe up against some of the big boys in the case of a startup.
remiss of me. We ought to just explain what's in your 2x2 grid. Can you just briefly explain that?
Well, it's actually very similar to, if not similar, it's we all know the Boston Matrix, but Boston Matrix has a certain purpose of identifying like your cash cows and your laggards. And all I've done is be able to take the same thing and say, taking buyer confidence on one axis, and I'm looking at it on the screen now, and then the other axis being your sort of that presence day one, and then being able to understand who's got the strongest position. So it maps its strongest position, shortlisted, but, not preferred, invisible or weak, and hidden strength. So, and for every one I've done so far, there's been vendors in each category. And there's always been a clear 4 or 5 vendors that sort of stand out on a day one shortlist.
It's very, very simple. So I think just last question for me. Thank you for explaining that. I mean, I think it sounds like from the beginning of this conversation, I thought you were going to say, why we talk about NPS, it's dead, but you still see some value in it. So this is about, I'm imagining what you were going to say. This is about providing an addition to NPS. NPS still has some value. This is about adding a new kind of dimension of value at a different place in that buying cycle.
I think this is a leading indicator. This is like pre-revenue. And again, like if you've identified your ideal customer profile and you know the personas you're going after, you can map your qualified buying group of who will be in your buying set. How do you make sure that you stand out and you are there to be considered to be purchased? Like you're on that day one list. That's what I love about Bain's work is they've synthesized it down to like no company looking to buy technology is going to consider more than 5 vendors. How do you show up as one of the 5 that can deliver a solution for them? I think that's the best thing out of this piece of work. I truly think all the signals are there that you can tune into. And it's as marketeers, staying focused in your ideal customer profile, like normally where you'll lose is where you're trying to service a market that you've never designed a product for, you've never designed a message for. It could be a sector you're going after, but you're not ready to go and talk their language. So it's just about focus really. And I think going back to that concept of, it's not necessarily about win and loss, it's fail. And like you can only win a deal that you're in the market to go and win, like you've got a right to be there.
It's the opposite of, there's a lot of this conversation about brands being in the market, but it's like, you're not in contention rather than them not being in the market. So it's the mirror opposite of that concept, which I think is really helpful to consider.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Tony, it's been fantastic to talk to you today. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on, for helping kind of circulate and share ideas, which is what I'm trying to achieve personally. And congratulations on what you've achieved.
No, listen, well, we haven't achieved anything yet because we need more people using it. But as I said, Joel, so nobody has to ask me. I'll give you the code. You can put it out with this sort of episode if you want to. And then what I would say, if anybody's using it, just let us know, did it work for you? And if you just want to jump on a quick 10-minute call and have a hack, I'm more than happy to help on that or anything AI related, really.
Well, that's fantastic. We'll find the best way to make the code available, whether it's directly linked from to you or somewhere or another. We'll do that. So
awesome.
I think it's a very valuable thing a resource to have, and it sounds like everyone should explore it. So Tony, thanks so much for being my guest today. Really enjoyed talking to you. It's a fascinating journey you've been through, and I'm really interested to hear how it all develops in the next few months. Thank you for listening today. I hope you enjoyed this. Remember, please to like, rate, or share, do any of those things to just give us an idea that you've enjoyed today. Remember, there's a huge archive of great content like this on the Trust Influence and B2B podcast archive with audio or video. And there's more great content coming around the corner very, very soon. So thanks for joining us today. I hope you can join us again very, very soon. But for me, for now, goodbye.